claims of major Russian setbacks and loss of life in the east.
A heavy storm, $5,000 worth of drones, and a $20 million Russian convoy vanished in minutes. It was a modern-day David and Goliath, where a handful of small, clever weapons brought a giant to its knees. Seat tight, and let me tell you how it went down. On October 25th at 6:45 p.m., a Kamaz truck rolled across a rain-soaked road along the Donets River. The weather was deteriorating quickly. Visibility was minimal. The driver was focused solely on the slippery road ahead, unaware that Ukrainian operators miles away were watching his progress in real time. This is the lead vehicle of the Russian convoy. Ukrainian reconnaissance specifically monitored this front vehicle because striking or disabling the lead truck creates an instant choke point. Once the front is halted or destroyed, the entire convoy becomes trapped on the narrow road beside the river, unable to maneuver or retreat. In less than a minute, a coordinated swarm of 12 small Ukrainian FPV drones, worth a combined $6,000, would dismantle an entire Russian supply convoy, worth over $20 million. The strike didn't rely on luck or coincidence. It was the result of a 3-day plan built around timing, weather, and the limitations of Russian air defenses. 72 hours earlier, Ukrainian intelligence had identified a large Russian convoy carrying fuel and ammunition toward the Pokrovsk front. If the convoy reached its destination, Russian units in the area would be able to encircle up to 2,000 Ukrainian troops. Destroying this convoy would prevent this attack on Ukrainian troops. And so the Ukrainians were using a blend of satellite tracking, meteorological modeling, and reconnaissance drone mapping. The Ukrainians weren't just tracking vehicles. They were analyzing the terrain, the weather forecast, river levels, radar coverage, and possible Russian defensive positions. Using satellite observation and recon drones, they documented every curve of the road, every elevation change, every section with poor visibility, and every narrow crossing. And when weather forecasts mentioned an incoming period of heavy rainfall, Ukraine saw an opportunity. Fog, rain, low cloud cover, and thick mud would disrupt Russian optics, radar, and movement. But Ukrainian drones equipped with AI navigation systems could still operate effectively. Basically, where Russian planners saw an inconvenience, Ukrainian planners saw it as a weapon. The convoy was considered well protected. A Pantsir S-1 air defense system traveled with them, backed by Orlan-10 reconnaissance drones that typically monitored low-altitude threats. Under normal conditions, this combination would have made a small drone swarm nearly impossible to approach. But in heavy rain, the Pantsir's radar performance suffered, and the Orlan struggled to maintain stable flight. The weather didn't eliminate Russia's defenses, but it degraded them enough to open a window. At 6:40 p.m., the Ukrainian strike phase officially began. The first drone to move was Banshee 7, an FPV platform flying at ultra-low altitude, roughly 10 meters above ground level. It wasn't a military-grade system. It was a $420 racing drone modified with an onboard AI stabilization chip. That chip mattered. It allowed the drone to maintain course through wind shear, rain bursts, and uneven air pressure that would normally throw a lightweight craft off target. The Banshee 7 had 3 tasks: to confirm convoy spacing, verify the lead vehicle's exact position, and check whether Russian air defense systems were active or idle. Banshee 7 flew ahead alone for a reason. Ukrainian doctrine for improvised drone swarms relies on a Pathfinder unit, a single drone that tests the airspace, measures signal interference, and feeds real-time corrections back to the operators. If Banshee 7 survived its run, the rest of the drone package could enter safely. Once Banshee 7 confirmed the corridor was open, the second stage of the ambush began. A larger carrier drone, call sign GOM, entered from a higher altitude and at a slower speed. GOM wasn't a strike drone itself. It was a launch platform. Attached beneath it was a release rack holding 12 FPV drones, each pre-programmed with a different target priority: lead vehicle, fuel transport, ammo carrier, rear guard, and the Pantsir system. At the designated waypoint, GOM switched to deployment mode. Telemetry packets updated simultaneously across all 12 FPVs. Then, in sequence, the release rack opened. 12 drones dropped, stabilized, armed, and immediately locked onto their assigned flight paths. This was the moment Russia's defenses should have reacted, but weather, terrain, and timing worked against them. The radar didn't detect the drop. The thermal systems didn't distinguish the FPVs through the storm distortion. Inside the Panzer's cabin, the operator noticed a faint radar anomaly, a dot appearing and disappearing. At first, he assumed it was interference from the storm, but seconds later, the single dot multiplied. 2 targets became 5, then 8, then 12. The radar image was erratic. The system struggled to classify the objects. The drones were flying too low, too small, and in unpredictable patterns. The Panzer's AI was designed to track large, consistent targets like aircraft and missiles, not a cluster of ultralight drones slipping through the rain. The operator switched the system to manual mode and locked onto the 2 largest radar returns. He fired 2 missiles, each costing over $100,000. Both hit their targets. The Russian crew celebrated, believing they had stopped the attack. But they had taken the bait. The 2 drones they hit were decoys intentionally flown higher and slower. While the Panzer wasted time and ammunition on the decoys, the remaining 10 drones dropped behind a hill where the radar couldn't see them. What's even worse, it had revealed its exact location through thermal flare and muzzle flash. The explosions created smoke and heat that further confused the system. By the time the operator tried to reacquire the targets, the drones had disappeared completely. At this moment, the Ukrainian operator executed a programmed maneuver called bird dance. This wasn't a literal reference to birds. It was a radar deception technique used in modern warfare. Traditional Doppler radar ignores random erratic movements. Generally, it puts them under the same category as birds in storm conditions. So, instead of flying straight, the Ukrainian drones made rapid, irregular shifts in altitude and velocity. On radar, they blended into the surrounding weather clutter, making it nearly impossible for the Panzer to distinguish them from the storm. Realizing something was happening that he couldn't track, the Russian operator radioed command and requested immediate support from an A-50 airborne radar aircraft stationed in Belgorod. But coordinating an airborne launch takes time, and the timeline was too short. The Ukrainian drones were already closing in, and unfortunately, it was too late. The lead vehicle reduced speed to cross the bridge in the storm, forcing the rest of the column into a tight, vulnerable stack. Momentum dropped, spacing collapsed, and maneuver room disappeared. Rainwater had made the bridge slick and unstable. As the trucks crept forward, the third vehicle, a fuel and explosives carrier, slid sideways and fell partially into the river. The driver tried to correct the movement, but the weight of the cargo pulled the truck down. Men exited their vehicles to assess the situation, unaware that the accident had become a choke point. 3 days earlier, Ukrainian recon had predicted exactly this scenario. As rainfall increased, the river would rise, turning the bridge into a bottleneck and making the convoy unable to maneuver or escape. When the convoy compressed after the river slide, the Ukrainian commander issued the long-awaited order. Release Grom. The carrier drone passed beneath the tree canopy and released 4 FPV strike drones, each fitted with a micro-shaped charge designed to disable engines and fuel compartments. Banshee 7, being the eye of the operation, slipped beneath the radar line, hugging the tree line and approaching the front of the convoy. Its pilot monitored the Panzer's sweep pattern, waiting for the storm to thicken over the bridge and for the convoy to compress into a single column. When the third truck went into the river, that was the signal. The command came: engage. The attack did not start with Grom's drones or the reserve FPVs. It started with Banshee 7. The drone descended to its strike altitude, positioning itself over the lead truck. Its camera confirmed the correct angle and distance. The shaped charge struck the fuel tank with a perfect oblique hit, detonating inside. Diesel ignited instantly. The explosion triggered a sympathetic detonation, cooking off ammunition in the second truck and igniting a chain reaction that rolled through the convoy. One precise strike had now incapacitated multiple vehicles. As Banshee 7 pulled away, the 4 drones released by Grom moved into the kill zone. They targeted vehicles further back, hitting engines, tires, and fuel lines. One drone struck a cargo bed, rupturing containers and igniting fuel canisters. Another one shredded an armored vehicle that was attempting to maneuver. The remaining FPVs advanced, ready to engage any stragglers, but by then the chain reaction initiated by Banshee 7 had already done most of the destruction. Several trucks were pushed off the road into the river, where their cargo detonated on impact or shortly after. Within minutes, the convoy was engulfed in fire, smoke, and exploding ammunition. Radios were filled with panicked chatter. Ukrainian satellite feeds recorded the destruction as a rising column of heat and debris. The front half of the convoy was completely destroyed. The remaining trucks stalled. Soldiers panicked, climbing out and running toward the riverbanks. Behind them, one of the drones, Hornet 12, hovered and recorded the incident. The tally of losses mounted quickly. Thousands of gallons of diesel, tons of ammunition, multiple trucks, and dozens of personnel incapacitated or missing. The entire attack lasted approximately 7 minutes. Ukraine didn't use artillery, jets, or large missiles. The operation relied on inexpensive drones, weather intelligence, and tactical timing. Back in the Ukrainian bunker, the screen displayed a simple message: mission complete. The engineers and operators celebrated. One of the younger engineers leaned back, whispering, "Slava Ukraini," and the room erupted in applause. Later analysis confirmed why the attack was so catastrophic. The location of the strike maximized damage, and the surrounding terrain amplified the shockwaves. The storm conditions nullified the Panzer's radar effectiveness, and the radar deception patterns caused further confusion. The Russians struggled to piece together what happened. By dawn, 80% of the convoy was destroyed or missing. The A-50 radar plane that had been sent for eventually reached the area, but visibility remained low, and all it could detect was a massive thermal zone left by the fires. Russian investigators arrived hours later, but they found no Ukrainian forces and very little physical evidence of the drones themselves, only structural wreckage, fragments, and burnt debris. The psychological impact spread through the ranks. Rumors circulated that Ukraine had developed drones capable of using storms to hide, drones that rode wind currents and appeared only on thermal sensors moments before impact. Whether true or not, the perception alone slowed Russian logistics. No replacement convoys moved during the next 48 hours as units waited for confirmation that the route was safe. So this attack begs the question: what other surprises could Ukraine bring to a war dominated by heavy weapons? If you want to see more behind-the-scenes strikes and understand how modern warfare is changing, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what comes next.